All right. Awesome, Derrick, man. Thank you so much for participating and being here. I wanted to talk with you because you've been on a wild ride past couple of months. And, one thing that I just love about you, and I know you're going to inspire other people, is you're just such a genuine guy. And I think that the struggles you've been, dealing with and overcoming, it's amazing that there's so many people out there who are dealing with some kind of version of health anxiety, but they feel like they're like the only one very often. And then there's so many people out there. And it's the type of experience that when you're going through it, as you can attest to, you feel like you're just going nuts, you feel like you're going crazy. And there's so many people who are going to relate to your experience. So thanks for being a part of that. I was wondering if just to start, can you just like give people a quick little introduction on who you are, where you're from, and then tell people a little bit about what life was like for you just a couple of months ago before you got started.
Yeah, I mean, my name's Derrick, from North Carolina, and about 4 months ago, my anxiety had pretty much got to its peak, worse than it ever had. Um, it took some time. I found the program and everything else, and going through that, I learned a lot. And even with the tools that I had, it was still hard. Because you still gotta push to get to the point that you want to be, even though you have the tools. I had struggled with it for, I think it was around 8 years or so total, if I'm not mistaken, and it would come and go.
What was kind of like a day in the life like back then?
Freaking miserable. Um, you would wake up in the morning and normally be fine, or at least I would. I know each person is different, but once I would get to going and moving and things like that, if I stayed pretty busy, I was okay. But if I had downtime, like if a lazy weekend around the house, like that Monday morning would be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting back, I guess on the horse, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And my mind would start to wander, and any little thing, like I could stomp my toe, and I'm gonna die in the next 30 minutes. That's just where it would go to.
And for you, it was mainly a fixation like on the heart, if I remember right, like
Yeah,
worrying about your blood pressure, different things like that.
my blood pressure, which is the only time it ever went up was when I was anxious.
Right.
When I was, when I had, pushed anxiety away, I never had an issue with it. I've been told by a couple of different doctors that, you're okay, you're fine, and things like that. But I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to believe it, because that was just the rut that I was in.
Yeah.
I was constantly worried about a heart attack, a stroke, blood clots,
Mm.
typical things that go along with like cardiovascular type stuff.
Right. Right. And what's interesting, a couple things that I've learned dealing with lots of health anxiety cases, people will get fixated on different parts of the health. Sometimes it's, somebody's so worried about their liver, even though they've never had a problem with their liver, all sorts of stuff like that. And what's interesting is this is usually when people fall down the rabbit holes of Googling and getting on WebMD. And then they're usually getting like 17 different opinions from all these medical professionals. And I think one of the things maybe you can speak to in a minute, that in your own words, but people are chasing that feeling of certainty. Like they think that if they just get that one extra little answer, or they get that one extra doctor opinion, that then they'll feel calm. And then I think as you started to realize, right, it's like that mind, it really just opens up more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it just opens up more perpetual uncertainty. So very often the things that people are doing to try to make themselves feel better, it's those very things that are usually causing things to be worse. Because you were I mean, you were interacting with your doctor pretty regularly, if I remember right.
Yeah, all the time. And I went through certain spells to where I would be worried about like my heart rate, oxygen level. But that was like right after I had COVID, when I was literally only sick for like a day.
Right.
Well,
Right.
that's all you hear being pushed out with the news and everything else. I mean, all you hear is, the bad effects of it and everything else. And,
Right.
Somebody, like me that was, kind of I guess you call like a hypochondriac, was like, oh, well, maybe that's me, even though it wasn't me, you
Right.
know?
Well, and then what happens, right? Nothing's really wrong, but you notice something in your body and then you think it's wrong. And then the thought that something is wrong raises your heart rate or, constricts your breathing or causes different changes. And so then you get the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing going.
Yeah. I know this one guy that can make his arms turn red.
Right. Yeah. Know him real good. Right.
Yeah.
And before we get into kind of how things started to change, if you'd be open to it, can you just maybe share a few words about, because nobody struggles with this type of thing like alone, right? It can cause stress or tension in a family or, different things like that. So how is this kind of affecting the relationships around you and the experiences you felt like you were able to do?
Well, I mean, the first thing is you don't want to go do anything. You want to be at home because that's your safe zone. Because if you have health anxiety, you can't die at home.
Right.
But it was messing with pretty much my whole family. My wife was wanting to go do things, and I would either try to work my way out of it or I would go. But even though I was there, I wasn't present.
Mm-hmm.
Same with my my dad. Me and him used to go to car shows, drag strips, racing, pretty much anything to deal with a motor and gasoline. And we hadn't done that in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Now, and that's got a lot to do with things getting busier and everything else. But just things like that I've missed out on because I thought something was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'll write it off before I'd ever even leave. Oh, well, we're going there and there's going to be 30,000 people there. Well, what if something happens? What's 30,000 people that could potentially help you? You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Sitting by yourself, that if something happened, can nobody help you because nobody's there.
Right.
But I mean, it messed with work relationships. It messed with family, everything. I mean, it literally, it affects everybody, and me and my wife's had several discussions because, she's never really had it. She's had some, few sensations and things like that throughout, but she's the type that, I guess I could say she's stubborn enough. She just don't pay no attention.
Right. Yeah. I guess so.
But
well, and you even had things like you wanted to. I remember a turning point for you was that sporting goods day, right, with your son, and maybe you could tell that story quickly because I think that'll help people start to see how the changes began for you.
Yeah, we had it was my son's first year playing t-ball this year, and we had taken him to his swim practice, and we were going to stop by, pick him up a pair of cleats, glove and everything else. And I literally played ball from the time I was, I guess, 4 or 5 years old until I was 26, 27 or so. And I mean, sports is pretty much what I learned life from, with the lessons that I learned there. And, I didn't want to go. Like, I was kind of in that, freak out moment because I was like, it's a big box store. I don't want to go in there, yada, yada, yada. And, my wife was like, well, I'll go get it. And when we pulled in, I was like, you know what? No, this is my son's first ever glove. This is my son's, first bat. This is his first, if, my parents did that with me when I was little, I probably wouldn't have ever played, if they wouldn't have went in because I would have never had that start.
Yeah.
And, I was just like, you know what? It's kind of like, what's it, the old Rocky movie? If he dies, he dies. If I die, I die. We're doing it either way.
Right. Yeah. So you just kind of, the narrative changed in that moment, right? It was like, no, I'm doing this no matter what. And, for the people listening who are looking for some takeaways, because that, on the surface, it seems like totally undoable. The idea that, perpetual patterns of anxiety can really get handled, right? That they can like virtually diminish or, even be eliminated seems like fantastical. But
Right.
it all starts, I have seen, well, I shouldn't say every single time, but most of the time it starts when people make it a must, like when it goes into this has to change now, right? As opposed to, oh, I need to change this. Yeah, I ought to. And what's beautiful about your story is you just decided like I'm doing this for my son, and you made it about someone else. And that's very often what I've learned is parents, as soon as they start to realize the impact that them not prioritizing their mental health is having on their children, then they'll make the change. But then we lie to ourselves and believe that our own mental health is not impacting people. Very often we will get into that lie for years, and we won't adequately prioritize it or draw the line in the sand. And your story illustrates, how one of those little moments can start to shift the momentum, in that other direction.
Yeah. I mean, and there's still things that, I struggle with now even, but the mindset's changed to where it's like, if it's a fight, then let's fight, and, you just got to do it. I mean, there's no cutting a corner. I mean, there's going to be times where, you push through and I mean, it sucks. It's terrible. It's hard. You feel miserable, but the next time you do it, it's easier. And then the time after that, it's easier,
Right. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that I think we should dig into here too, right? Because, when you got started, things could tailspin really quickly. I mean, I even remember you, I think, calling me directly or texting me like, hey, can you talk? Right. And your go-to impulse at the time was, I'm starting to feel like I'm freaking out. I need to talk to somebody. And so you could get really spiraled about the health. And now, what you're realizing, the theme that I've been trying to impart to you and I try to impart to so many other clients is, it's not like you ever reach this moment where like, oh, now my mind is never, ever, ever going to be worried about anything ever again. But rather it's like, oh, we now have demonstrated that our comfort zone used to be this big and now it's this big, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we keep demonstrating to ourselves that we can do more than we convinced ourselves we could before. You know what I'm saying? Like, as opposed to getting all hung up, as opposed to being in this comfort zone where you barely leave home or just go to work and you don't go into the grocery stores, now you go, oh yeah, I can beat the damn grocery store, and it gets a little larger. And then it's like, oh, all right, well, I can go, like I know for you is going to your big church, right? Like, oh yeah, I can go be in a big church. Okay, cool. And things get easier and easier and easier as your comfort zone expands, and you're constantly building that emotional muscle of testing it and pushing it. And so when you're saying like fighting and those things, the things your daily life now looks so different from a couple of months ago because you're not hung up about the same types of things. Is that accurate, or maybe you can explain them a little more?
Most definitely. Funny story actually. This weekend we were gonna go fishing and didn't have, and we were searching around. We were up at my mother-in-law's and small little town, and you know, I despise Walmart. I despise Walmart before I ever had issues with any type of anxiety or anything like that. And I was trying to go to all the little places first before I was like, all right, well, I'll do it. Well, I told my wife, I was like, we're leaving the last place. I said, you drive. She said, why? I said, I'm gonna show you something. Well, everybody that's ever been at Walmart knows all the sporting stuff's in the very back. So I said, drop me off up front. Go park the car. And I didn't necessarily want to. I walked back, and before I knew it, I was in there like 15, 20 minutes. Right. Because I wasn't focused on what could happen. I was focused on, hey, we're getting ready to go fishing. I got to get this. I need to, get that. I need to check this to see if I need to get a new one of those. Right. Things like, because I had, thought in mind of, A to B. And that was what all it, is just that, and I can walk out. I was just like all happy because, 2-3 months ago, that would have never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, just walk in a convenience store. I didn't go in there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think, for people who are watching too, because I want to make sure that they get some takeaways. I think the first big takeaway your story presents is, if you're not going to make the change for yourself, make it for somebody else. That's a huge one. I think the second one too, that you're demonstrating as well, is you're not going to feel like it all the time. Like, developing emotional fitness is about training your mind and your body to do what you want it to do, even when you don't feel like it, right? Because when you can get yourself to execute and take action in the places where you wouldn't have otherwise, now you've got freedom, right? Because you're not just beholden to waiting to eventually feel secure, waiting to eventually feel good enough or whatever, and then you can go into the store. It's just like, all right, well, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable, let's do it. And then expanding the comfort zone like we talked. So I think that's fascinating.
One of the biggest I noticed, or well, not noticed, but realized is it's just a feeling. It's no different than being happy or being sad or excited or whatever it may be. It's literally just a feeling.
Right. And what's interesting about the sensation of anxiety too is, like, I think one of the first conversations we had, I don't know if this was with you or someone else, but it's like you start getting anxious about getting anxious, right? Like, that's the interesting thing about anxiety, is just the idea of what if I freak out causes you to freak out. So it has that sort of self-fulfilling nature to it. But
that was the thing we ruled out was what if, if and why, I believe was the two things.
Why? Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because, you had been dealing with this for a while. And, how did you find the approach that I took with you to be different from what you had done before? Like, maybe you can just provide a little high level explanation to that. Because a lot of people are like, well, is this going to be like therapy? Is this going to be like this? Like,
Definitely.
How's it going to feel?
Yeah, it's definitely not therapy. Therapy I think is great if you can, for the simple fact of getting it off your chest, like for the frustration side of it. But I don't think therapy can get rid of. There's a reason why you hear people, I've been in therapy for 20 years. Well, maybe there's a reason, This here's basically kind of, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. It's more like a slap in the face, I guess you could say, because it's like it kind of wakes you up to what you've actually been doing.
Sure.
Like, as far as with the patterns and things like that, I can see where I was messing up versus just saying, oh, well, I messed up, let me tell you about it. There's a time and a place for things like that. Mm-hmm. But as far as to get down to the root of it, this to me worked so much better because it let me see where I was messing up and what I needed to fix to reverse that.
Gotcha. Slap in the face. Yes. Well, I know we had a couple phone calls that were like a loving slap in the face a little bit.
Yeah, there was a couple of those.
But it's always with love, of course. So let's see. What do you think was, the biggest thing that you either learned or, like what would be like, one, just so I can make sure viewers get like a third takeaway, right? Like, what do you think would be a third takeaway you would want people to get from your story or your journey? Like, what did you learn or what did you do different that you think helped get you where you're at now?
I think the biggest thing, I would say the number one is seeing, like I just said, where you're messing up. The second one would be, finding out how to correct it. And then I would say the third thing would be, just the fact of it is possible. Like within a couple of weeks, I could see, a change. And that time, that you were talking about where I called you, I was like, hey, can you talk? Everything else, that was, I don't know, probably a month in. And I had gotten away from what I had previously been doing the last few weeks where I could see the change.
Right.
And, with that, it just all goes back to me, it all goes back to seeing where you're creating it. I mean, that's just, to me, that's it. I mean,
yeah. Well, and so what's interesting too, I think there's this term, a lot of people have heard it, a lot of people haven't, but it's called metacognition. So the idea of like thinking about how you're thinking, right? So being able to kind of see how you're thinking. And so we kind of do that in layers, right? And I think you can attest to that, where it's like, okay, well, here's a little bit of a way to understand why you're feeling anxious, how it's happening. And then here's a thing to practice. And then you practice that for a while. And then, okay, well, here's another thing to learn. And you're like, oh, wow. And there seems to be like a cascading series of breakthroughs for most people, where they start to learn more and more and more of how they got where they are now, regardless of their past. But more importantly, what you're kind of saying too is, it doesn't really do us any good to talk about this stuff unless we're actually doing something about it. Like, what can you do now to make life better this upcoming week, as opposed to just talk about how shitty the week before was, right?
Doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome's literally the worst idea you could ever possibly do.
Right.
Because, I mean, change if you're doing the same thing.
Right. So for those people out there who every morning are waking up totally convinced that there's something wrong with their body, that they're totally unhealthy, even though their doctors have all told them, they've cleared the tests, and they just think that they're, the doctors are wrong. They got to do that extra little test. They got to talk to a holistic doctor. They got to go to that next thing, right? And they're so caught up in this total certainty that there's something wrong with them, right? Like, what would you want to say to them? What would be your final message to them?
That it's all BS. That it's literally, it's nothing. I mean, it's really not. I mean, if you've told you're fine, you're fine. Obviously something freak could happen, but more than likely, nothing's going to happen to you.
There you go. So now you're living life a lot more free-spirited, sounds like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, what's beautiful too is I know that, I mean, forgive me if I'm misquoting you, but I believe you were even saying that if the anxiety didn't get fixed, the marriage was going to be in a lot of trouble, right? Didn't you say something like that?
Oh, yeah, it definitely was hurting it for sure.
Yeah. So you got yourself back, your marriage back, and now you're off to T-ball. Is it T-ball season?
It's already over.
No, it's over now. I see.
Play, but I think 7 or 8 games. It was pretty
ready for the next sport, I guess.
Yep.
So
I'm working on my now. So
you're working on your what?
Working on my golf game.
Golf. Yes. Good.
Got to get back.
Yeah. I know I'm gonna have to meet you down in the Carolinas, and you'll have to show me some courses down there. So I hear it's golf central destination.
There's some good.
Awesome. All right, Derrick. Well, I really greatly appreciate you, being here, sharing a little bit about, your journey, your process. Obviously, the growth continues. What's beautiful about you too is, you kind of came out of the end of this and realized, I want to give back. I want to do more. I want to help other people, and there's so many people out there who are struggling. And we're excited to be working with you to help develop your skills so that you can impact people too. It's going to be a fun little next chapter in the experience, but thank you for doing your part and, creating a little bit of openness about the situation and talking about how, you've really been earning your freedom from health anxiety piece by piece. It's been really awesome. So congratulations on all your success, and thank you again, brother.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you real soon. See ya.
See ya.